Today, my dear sewing friends, the project is beyond easy. We're going to take about 1.5 yards of beautiful knit or maybe some beautiful Sherpa fabric, and we're going to transform it into a cozy cardigan. It's so easy, you don't even actually have to have a pattern or draft a pattern. That's how easy it is. It's going to take maybe an hour, maybe 1.5 hours, and you will be done. It's stylish, it's cozy, it's easy to make, and it's going to serve you well throughout the whole fall and winter season. So, you know what? What's not to love? And I challenge you to make it because I know you can do it. So let's get started. You're watching Easy Sewing DIY, a weekly series where I make a simple pattern, then I sew it and love it. Everything is straightforward so you can make it as well. Tune in for new episodes every weekend. Dear sewing friends, it's Elisa here with Thoughtful Creativity, and thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Just like I mentioned, this particular sewing make doesn't even require a pattern, but regardless of that, we're still gonna kind of sketch it out so that way we have a clear understanding of what are we actually doing. So let's get that started. And I'm sure that you've seen quite a lot of these pop up on the internet, so we're gonna take inspiration from that and then we're gonna draft our own. It's gonna have a collar, triangular shaped sleeve, and also a cuff. And now you will need just two simple measurements. Number one, you're gonna take your measuring tape and you're gonna open up your arms wide like this. Make sure that the measuring tape goes over your bust, and then you're gonna take that measurement. We're only gonna use half of it. So write down half of the open arm measurement. The second measurement is also very straightforward. You're gonna take your measuring tape, you're gonna place it on the back of your neckline, and then you're gonna drop it all the way to your waist. And my suggestion would be to take double that length. And I'll explain you why in just about a moment. But that is gonna create the best possible cardigan for you. So let's get onto the visuals. So here I have two rectangles just to show you what to do and what not to do. We're going to fold our piece of fabric in half, and this line over here is going to be the length of the actual garment. Now we're going to fold it the other way, just like this, and just to make it easier to understand, here's my waist, and as we spoke, that line is going to be double the length from the neckline to the waist. Now we're going to create the sleeve, and we're doing it by folding in the triangles. Of course, we're going to cut it and add the cuff as well, but here, now it actually starts to resemble the cardigan that we have envisioned. Now, if you want to take a shorter length of your cardigan, let's say you just want to take it from the neckline all the way to the waist, and you don't want to double that in length. So I'm marking my waist over here, and you see here it's at the midpoint, and here is just at the very bottom. Now, when we fold our sleeves with that kind of length of the cardigan, you will see here in a second that it does not create a long enough sleeve. Therefore, your shoulder is probably going to be falling off your shoulders. So that's what's going to happen. So you see that the length plays a very important part in creating that sleeve that's going to stay on your shoulders. So now I have to choose my fabric, and when it comes to choosing fabric for this particular project, you can even go with a jersey knit or a lightweight knit, or even fabric that has no stretch whatsoever. I will guide you through that in a couple of minutes when we actually get into sewing this project. But really what you want to look for is what is the purpose of your cardigan. I am sewing cardigan for fall winter season, so I really want fabrics that will keep me warm, that will serve that purpose. If you're making this cardigan for maybe cold summer nights, then use something that's a little bit lighter. You also want to make sure that your fabric has a very good drape, so that way it really looks nice and flowy on your body. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to fold our fabric in half, and the measurements that I'm using for the width of my project is going to be 26 inches, which an open arm measurement is 52 inches, so half of that, 26 inches. The actual length of the garment is going to be 40 inches for me. Now, we need to add some seam allowances to these measurements. We're going to add 1 inch to the top and the bottom, which is going to make it 42 inches, and then we're going to add half an inch to the sides, which is going to make it 26.5 inches. When you measure your fabric, you need to make sure that you have a little bit of fabric left so that you can make cuffs out of the same material. However, you can also use a contrasting fabric and make it really fun. Once my rectangular is all cut out, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take care of the sleeves. This is the center of the side, and I'm going to fold in the sleeves just to see how they actually look on the body before I commit to stitching and just putting everything in place. And for you, I would advise the same, especially when you're not sure about the measurements, or maybe you have some different idea of the proportions of the garment in mind. Then I would say take old bed sheet and don't cut it up. You don't have to cut it up, but you can still fold it in find the same proportions and put it on yourself and see if it's the length that you want, if it's the width that you want, and etc. So here I'm just putting the sleeve together, making sure that everything is nice and neat. I'm gonna pin it in place and we're gonna try it on. If you are putting this on while the pins are still in, just like I'm doing right now, I beg you, please be very careful. Don't poke yourself, okay? All right, so I'm pretty happy. I know it's, it looks like a mess right now, but I promise you we're gonna make it look really good. All right, let's get sewing. We're going to start at the top of our cardigan first, and as you remember, we left 1-inch seam allowance, and I also want to create sort of a collar over here. So with that 1-inch seam allowance, what we're going to do is we're going to fold it in 1/2 inch first, just like this, and then we're going to fold it another 1/2 inch in like this, and then we're going to stitch it on this edge, and then we're going to pin it all in place so that way it's all nice and secure by the time we go to the sewing machine. And then we're going to use zigzag stitch to stitch it in place. You can use a straight stitch if your fabric does not stretch. However, this knit has a very minimal amount of stretch to it, but it's still nice to use zigzag stitch so that way it is flexible what we need it to be. Take your time and make sure that all of your stitches are nice and even, since these are going to be visible as you're wearing your cardigan. And here you see an up-close shot of the sewing machine and the presser foot in action. And please know that my hand in the back of the presser foot is not stretching the fabric. I'm just using it to make sure that the fabric does not curve and stays nice and flat and my stitches are even. When you're sewing with knits, it's very important to not to stretch the fabric as you sew. And this is how it looks when it's all done. Now, when the top part of the cardigan is done, we're going to do exactly the same with the bottom part of the cardigan. The only difference, we're going to fold it the other way, just like you see me do on your screen. We're going to repeat exactly the same stitch, whether it's a zigzag stitch or a straight stitch of your choice. And then we're going to move on to the next step. And when the bottom of the cardigan is done, it's time to assemble the sleeve. We're going to start by working with the top part of the cardigan first. And here I had the idea of creating a lapel. I did fold it over about 3 inches wide, and you can skip this part or you can do it with me together. And then just pin it in place so that way it doesn't go anywhere. Now, after you've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to reposition our sleeve a little bit, since now these do not align. Just fold them together like so, and make sure that you find a new center. And after that, just pin everything in place. Make sure that the edges of the lapel and of the bottom part of the cardigan match, so that way when you sew them together they're nice and even. Pin everything in place, and then we're going to serge. And yes, we're going to serge from one edge to the other edge, since we're going to make an opening for the cuff later. And you don't have to use a serger, you can use the same zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Once you have sewn both sleeves shut, it's time to make an opening for the cuff. Now here is the thing, if you're working with a fabric that has a little bit of a stretch, then you have a little bit of a wiggle room and you can make your opening a little bit tighter. Now if you're working with a fabric that has no stretch whatsoever, you need to make sure that you will be able to get your wrist through that opening. So I'm going to measure my wrist, and with quite a bit of wiggle room, it's going to be about 8 inches. And I'm going to mark where it measures 4 inches across on my sleeve. Now instead of cutting straight, I'm going to make a slight curve. So that way, when we open up our sleeve, it's actually going to be a circle. We are on the finishing line, so let's assemble our cuffs. Your cuff can be as tall as you want it to be, but width-wise, it needs to be the same width as your sleeve opening. If you have fabric that has a little bit of stretch to it, then you can get away with making the cuff smaller. If you have fabric that does not stretch, then you need to make sure that it matches the exact length, or skip the cuff altogether and just hem the sleeve. Sew the cuff together, and after that, turn it inside out to create a double-sided tunnel. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to find the bottom center of your sleeve, and if you would like to, you can match the seam of the sleeve with the seam of the cuff. However, I do prefer for the seam of the cuff to be facing downwards. Next thing is you're gonna thread your cuff onto the sleeve like so, and then you want to make sure that you match the seam of the cuff with the center bottom of your sleeve. Pin them in place and sew them together. And you're going to repeat that on the other sleeve as well. And you just made yourself a beautiful and cozy cardigan. Ta-da! So how easy was that? I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I definitely enjoyed making this cardigan and I'm gonna get a ton of wear out of this. If you did like this tutorial, chances are you're gonna like some other of my tutorials as well. I have quite a few drafting tutorials on my channel, so go ahead and check them out and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!